Welcome to the channel. Establishing the inputs. If there was nothing more to experience itself than the information our sense organs pick up from the interaction with the environment, there would be nothing relating this information to us, the individual. There would be no our life experience. The information would just sit there and would be of no use to us. As such, the information our sense organs pick up from the interaction with the environment cannot solely result in experience itself. Although inarguably, this most definitely is an input. Experience itself must also be comprised of an input that serves as a sort of bridge that relates the information directly to the individual, providing context for our interactions, meaning that it takes into consideration the individual's past experience. Without this bridge, experience would be impossible. There would be no sense of continuity across our existence. For now, let us officially declare the information our sense organs pick up from their interaction with the environment as input number 1 and figure out exactly what this other input that would serve as a bridge would have to be. Note: past experience absolutely has to be an input resulting in experience itself. If this was not the case, we would be lost in place at all times. We would be completely disassociated from our surroundings, and there would be no connection between the individual and the environment. This past experience includes the knowledge of how to interact with things, people, and literally everything that comprises our surroundings, grants context. Imagine if when we looked at somebody we've known our entire life, there was suddenly no context for our interaction and we simply drew a blank. No continuity of our life experience with this particular individual would be possible from that moment on. Now imagine if this were the case with everything, not just that individual. Grasping the consequential nature of this context, which is provided by our past experience and is part of experience itself, is a bit difficult, as we may have never experienced not having it. But if the individual has ever experienced any form of disassociation, they have an idea of the implications. We would be like babies, unable to function in any sense of the word. The implications of not having past experience as a component, which ultimately results in our life experience, do indeed go much deeper than simply not being able to recognize somebody. Input number 2, associations. Past experience forms part of experience itself in the form of associations. Associations are what implant meaning into our interactions and provide the context and continuity that makes up said experience. These imbue our surroundings with our history, context, so that when we interact with said surroundings, this history can be further developed, continuity. Associations form the infrastructure for all our interactions that shape our life experience. These are the second input that makes up experience itself. For the remainder of this chapter, we will focus on what associations are, how these are established, and how these function. Keep in mind that if we are to consciously affect the inputs that result in experience itself, we must learn everything there is to know about said inputs. By thoroughly understanding this input, associations, we will simultaneously gain a bit of insight into experience itself. However, it will not be until Chapter 2 that we will cover the exact details of how the two inputs interact together, the process, to form experience itself. Before we can understand the mechanics of associations, we have to cover the 3 different ways in which we experience. The reasoning behind this is that associations are actually created by these 3 different ways. Note: in a similar scenario to that one of the chicken and the egg, in regard to which came first, associations are an input responsible for experience itself, and yet our life experience is responsible for the creation of said associations. Since we view our life experience in segmentations we call experiences, and not just one singular experience, it is indeed possible for certain experiences to create certain associations, and then for these associations to create new experiences, and so on, in a cyclical manner. This is a perfect example of a feedback loop where the system is continuously updating itself. The 3 ways we experience. The information our sense organs pick up from their interaction with the environment is actually not something we consciously experience. The information is interpreted by our mind, and the result of this is sensorial experience. We, however, do not only experience sensorially, we do so in 3 different ways. The other 2 ways in which we experience are thinking and feeling. The manifestation of these are thoughts and emotions accordingly. The manner in which we experience sensorially is manifested as sensations that include sounds, images, smells, tastes, and textures. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations are what experience itself is comprised of, and consequently our own life experience as well. Each way we experience is brought about by a capacity we have. Our capacities are not part of our life experience, just as our body itself is not part of this either. However, just like our bodies do, capacities contribute to our life experience and make this possible. Let us go over each way we experience and clarify the capacity that corresponds to the specific manner of experiencing. Way we experience. Thinking. Capacity to think. Experience via this capacity comes in the form of thoughts. When we think, we are experiencing. Thoughts are strictly limited to internal dialogue. These do not include images or any other form of sensorial experience. Way we experience. Feeling. Capacity to feel. Emotions. Experience via this capacity comes in the form of emotions. When we feel, we are experiencing. Emotions do not include sensorial experience. Way we are experiencing. Sensing. Capacity to sensations. To touch, to taste, to smell, to see, to hear. Sensations. Smells, sounds, images, tastes, textures. Experience via this capacity comes in the form of sensations. When we taste, hear, smell, touch, and see, we are experiencing. Our sense organs pick up the information from the environment, but the act of sensing is our mind's interpretation of said information and is what is experienced. We categorize sensations as textures, tastes, smells, sights, or sounds, depending on which sense organ the information originated from. What exactly are associations? Associations are chains of linked elements that allow for the uninterrupted flow of our life experience. The associations consist of not only the connecting capacity, but also of elements, that which is being connected. The elements are records our mind creates of the thoughts, sensations, and emotions we experience at some point in our life. Each element is a unique component representing, in the form of a record, one of the 3 results of the ways in which we experience: thought, sensation, or emotion, which, when the elements are combined, make up the associations. These associations, consisting of elements, make experience itself possible by being automatically, not by means of a conscious and proactive process, recalled at the appropriate times so as to provide us with the context and continuity in regard to our surroundings and interactions. They are what can be denounced as context sensitive and work a lot like memory does, except that these are not proactively recalled but rather automatically triggered. When we experience something that is likened to an element in one of our associations, this causes the other elements pertaining to the specific association to be triggered, and thus all the elements in said associations will be experienced by us. Note: when we are experiencing, the results of the capacities by which we experience, thoughts, emotions, and sensations, are not the elements. These are simply the experience. The elements are the records of the experience our mind creates as part of the association once we have lived the experience. It must also be noted that the elements are not exact duplicates of the actual experience, but rather are the best our mind is able to record and degrade with time, as will be explained in an upcoming section. Below are the categories of elements that make up our associations, along with a description of each. Since the elements are records of our experience, the categories for these are the same as the result of our capacities. Element: recorded thought. A recorded thought is a snippet of internal dialogue that our minds segmented and can identify as a unit. A recorded thought is not just internal dialogue, thinking. It is an internal statement that has been identified and separated, recorded. Recorded thoughts do not include images or any form of sensorial information. They are strictly segmented internal dialogue with a clear beginning and end. Element: recorded emotion. A recorded emotion is a rather straightforward element. These can be comprised of any one of all the different emotions a person can have. The only limitation here is that an element created from our feeling capacity can only consist of one emotion per element. Element: recorded sensation. Image, sound, smell, taste, texture. Any sensation can be recorded by our mind and thus form part of an association as an element. We have an easier time recognizing how our mind records an image or a sound since we can clearly experience these sensations independent of any external stimulus. We can see images, hear sounds in our mind without the need for external stimulus. However, when it comes to sensations originating from touching, smelling, and tasting, we might be reluctant to believe that textures, smells, and tastes can also be recorded and stored in our mind as elements, and thus able to form part of associations. This doubt comes about due to our difficulty in experiencing textures, smells, and tastes without an external stimulus. Whatever the reason for our inability to experience textures, smells, and tastes as strongly without the external stimulus present may be, these sensations are not excluded from forming part of associations as elements. We can tell what an object is, sometimes, solely by its taste. For example, this is due to a specific taste having formed part of an association, as an element of said association, which brings about our experience of the object, including the thought that serves to identify the object. This is a perfect example of how associations work, as we will shortly see when we cover the topic more thoroughly. Note: the sensations are not created by our sense organs. Our sense organs acquire the information, but our mind is what interprets the information and creates the sensations we experience. How associations are formed. Now that we have familiarized ourselves with how we experience via the three capacities, we can understand the process by which our mind creates our associations. The first thing to keep in mind is that not all experiences result in associations. Associations have the possibility of forming when we experience via more than one of the capacities simultaneously, and one of these capacities involved is the feeling capacity. Not only does an emotion have to be involved, result of the feeling capacity, but it also has to be strongly experienced. If the emotion is weakly experienced, the association will likely not form, despite the initial requirement having been met. The second way for an association to form, even if the feeling capacity is not involved in the overall experience, is through circumstantial repetition. If we have what can be considered a similar experience on several instances across time, then an association may yet be formed. A perfect example of this is learning. Most learning takes place via circumstantial repetition, which forms associations over time by means of repetition. linking thoughts and images or thoughts with other thoughts, etc., without the need for feeling capacity. This is essentially us telling our mind how things are, and the only requirement is that we have similar experiences across time. Let us go over an extremely simple example to understand how associations are created, along with their elements. We are casually sitting in a park when suddenly, out of apparently nowhere, a dog comes over to us and licks our face. This interaction causes us to swell up with a feeling of love towards the animal. Now, from this simple experience, it can be inferred that we experienced via all three ways. We felt, emotion, we touched, sensorial, and we thought. Due to the strong emotion we felt, the requirement for the association to form, our mind established the association, which includes the following three elements. Element 1, the image of the dog, based on sensorial capacity. Element 2, the thought of dog, based on thinking capacity. Element 3, the emotion of love, based on the feeling capacity. From then on, whenever we see a dog that resembles this one, we will likely feel a natural sense of affection towards them or even develop a liking for the specific type of dog. The manner in which associations create our experience greatly varies. It must be noted that if the exact same scenario would have taken place, save for the feeling of love we felt for the animal, the association would not have been established. This shines a light on why it is that when we attempt to learn people's names, we have such a difficult time. If our feeling capacity is not involved, we will likely not create the association between the individual's name and their image. The only manner in which we will be able to memorize their name is via repetition. We establish the association between the name, thought, and their image, sensation. How associations work. We know how associations are created, but how exactly are these responsible for the continuity and context regarding our life experience? Associations are activated as reactions and take place automatically. When we have an experience in which some part of said experience closely resembles an element from one of our established associations, whether that be the sensation, an emotion, or a thought, this serves as a trigger that brings about the other elements from the particular association into our life experience, a sort of chain reaction. Our experience is recalled, and the association will be experienced by us via our capacities. One element triggers the other elements in the particular association. Note, we do not encounter the elements directly in our life experience. Our life experience consisting of our thoughts, emotions, and sensations, but rather something that resembles the element very closely. The manner in which associations function might make this seem a lot like what we currently understand as remembering, but it is different. The main inconsistency between remembering and how associations work is that the former is the active process of recalling, while associations are something that take place automatically in the background. Think about it. We effectively do not remember for the grand majority of our interactions. We are not going around actively recalling details regarding all the people we have met or how to interact with our environment. Our interactions take place via the context that is provided by our associations. If this process or interactions are based upon was something we had to actively engage in constantly, we would not be able to function. The overwhelming number of instances for which we would have to engage in this process manually would incapacitate us. Reflect upon how long it can take to remember something. Now consider if every single interaction with a person, an object, or anything else took this long to come to mind, if it ever did. Life as we know it is only possible thanks to our mind taking care of this process for us automatically. The mind is a wonderful ally, which we often take for granted and sometimes can even view as our enemy. Note, when associations are brought up in our experience, these mesh with the experience we are currently having. When it comes to thoughts and feelings, since we can only have one of each of these at a time, these elements replace any thought and feeling we might have been experiencing. When it comes to sensations, these mesh with our current sensorial experience, since we can have several sensations at a time. This might also be why our sensations are not as strong without the external stimulus. Imagine if they were. We would see things that were not there, smell, feel, and touch things that were not there. Our entire existence would be compromised, and there would be no heads or tails to anything. The external and the internal worlds would become indistinguishable. First-hand experience for understanding associations. There is no better way to understand how associations work than by experiencing this firsthand. Awareness is the key to observing the workings of associations within our own life. In order to bear witness to this, we can simply engage in association by triggering it via an experience. We can initiate a thought, the triggering experience, and notice what emotions, sensations, images most likely, and/or other thoughts are triggered as a result of our initial thought. The trick for this to work is that we must allow for our life experience to unfold as if we were not observing, as if there was nobody watching. If the thought brings up an emotion, we must go into the emotion and feel it. We must pretend we are operating in our normal, non-analytical mode, in which we are not self-conscious regarding our life experience, and we simply allow this to be in an uninhibited fashion. Admittedly, this is quite difficult, but it can indeed be done. We must not confuse this practice with what is typically thought of as meditation, where the goal is to clear one's mind. Quite the contrary, we are attempting to maintain our normal flow of operation. If we clear our mind, we cannot observe how we normally experience when we are not aware. Think of social media. We mindlessly scroll through posts on our feed, one post linking to the next. However, if we become aware of our mindless scrolling, say when somebody is watching us, we will likely stop, as we will become self-conscious and our awareness will affect our otherwise mindless behavior. Our aim is to bring awareness but continue behaving in a mindless fashion as if we were not aware. Only in this manner will we truly be able to observe how associations work. Note: meditation works by bringing awareness into our life experience, and thus our life experience is slowed down due to our becoming self-conscious, just as in the example of when we feel somebody watching us mindlessly scrolling through social media. Many people believe that meditation slows down just our thoughts, but it slows down our entire life experience, not just our thoughts. It slows down all of experience. Download the complete book in order to follow along from the website. The link is in both the video and the channel description. Thank you so much.